Mike, thanks for taking the time with us today. Let's talk about InMotion Ventures. Let's start maybe with a little bit of background. Can you tell us, I guess, let's start with sharing InMotion Ventures investment thesis or strategy.
Yeah, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations on your levels of endurance. I think you're doing very well. So thank you for still being here. So as Justin said, so my name is Mike Smeed. I'm the managing director of InMotion Ventures. We are the venture capital arm of JLR, which is the new name for Jaguar Land Rover. And we have created a new brand, or a set of brands around our products, which really stand in their own right as brands such as Range Rover, Defender, Discovery, and Jaguar. And our focus, really following a reset in 2022, is about accelerating the pace of innovation within JLR. As many of you will know, there's probably some quite grumpy, tired people in this room. And if they are, they're all from the auto industry, because there's a lot going on across very many different fields in that area. And we recognize that as a business, as a relatively small business based in the UK, that we would not be able to achieve all of our strategic ambitions about reimagining JLR as an electric-first company. I mean, we heard from Maersk just now, we can beat you by 1 year, so we're going to go net zero by 2039. But there's a lot going on in terms of what's going on in lots of industries around mobility and transportation. And really, innovation is going to be at the heart of that, because as we've just heard, and we heard this morning, it's just going to be impossible to keep up with all of these scopes of innovation, because we'll all be sitting here with having millions of employees having to do all of those things. So that's really what we're here to do. Right.
And so, given the vastness of that, right, we're not boiling the ocean, but tell us a little bit about how that the scope of that strategy. How do you narrow that down? How do you break it into pieces? How does that strategy get implemented, either in the way you look at targets or the way you structure transactions? Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about implementation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's nothing like a deadline to focus the mind, and and particularly, for those of you from the EU, will know, or from Europe, will know that in 2035 we're not allowed to sell any combustion engine vehicles in Europe. So that focuses the mind in terms of that deadline. But at the beginning of 2022, we looked across the business and we identified 7 strategic areas, and I'll take a deep breath and try and remember them all. But what we did across the business was create squads. And I was talking to, I think Angie's in the room from IBM. We spoke this morning about a very similar structure with their 5 areas and our 7. So focused on electrification first, obviously, within the OEM world. And that comes both from battery technology, but also from the customer experience. So as a luxury vehicle maker, it's really important for us that the charging experience for our customers and clients is as premium as the vehicles that they're driving within. So that's one. Sustainability, obviously, is the second one. And if people aren't here with a sustainability vertical, I would be worried. But we're focusing on 2 things there in particular. The first one is around sustainable materials. So focus on non-animal leather and circularity within our products. So deliberately making vehicles and products that can be disassembled at the end of their life. That's, again, a really important thing, building that into the manufacturing and design process. But also, in terms of scope 1 and 2, looking at our manufacturing operations from a sustainability standpoint as well. The connected vehicle. So again, there are thousands of data points in a modern vehicle. And looking at the battery health, the health of the vehicle, as well as keeping our customers connected. One of the reasons you drive a Defender is because you want to get in the middle of nowhere, but that's no use if you lose your signal. So how do we work seamlessly between network providers and satellite providers to ensure that? So there's 3. I'll keep going. Digital services, again, focusing then on the monetization of the data that's provided, but also providing our customers with exceptional services within their vehicle, value-added subscriptions and things like that. We then wanted to focus on talent, particularly retention and recruitment. As we know, many industries, but particularly in the automotive industry, we're not starting from a great place in terms of diversity and inclusion. So how do we bring that into the fore? And then the metaverse was another one area of ours, which we've struggled with. And I'd love if there's anyone in the room who's managed to crack the metaverse. But it'd be really interesting from our perspective about how do people interact? Do they want to buy a car in a virtual showroom? How do you reveal a vehicle virtually? And then just finally, around our industry 4.0 or now 5.0, if you add in ESG. And how can we make sure that we use as much AI as we can in our manufacturing process? So those are the 7 areas. Those are the 7 squads with experts. My investment team are across all of those 7 areas. And we're looking for opportunities where an investment from us would add value to that relationship to drive that innovation through.
There you go. Wow. All right. Lot to do.
Yeah, I remember them all as well. I'll do it.
All right. So you're managing 7 different squads. Let's talk a little bit about your background. So you're relatively new to InMotion Ventures, but you've got a long history with JLR. So give us a little bit of your background and tell us what this new world involves.
Yeah, sure. So I've only been in CVC for 9 months. So I've got a significant level of imposter syndrome sat here. So if you want to go now, then that's absolutely fine. But my background's finance. So I had a finance career, mainly actually not even in automotive. So I really don't know why I'm here. But focused on retail and FMCG. So mainly in American companies. So for Procter & Gamble, Gillette, Virgin, and then Walgreens. So Walgreens Boots Alliance. For those of you in the UK, Boots Pharmacy, owned by the company who own Walgreens and Duane Reade. And that's where I became involved in the private equity side. I joined JLR in 2018 and then spent the last 2 years before I came back to the UK to take on this role in China as the CFO of our joint venture with Chery Automobile, where we produce 5 vehicles for the domestic market in China in a plant just outside of Shanghai. And I think I only realized the other day that I've worked in London, Geneva, Frankfurt, New York, and Shanghai, but don't work for a bank. So I'm not sure if that's a unique thing or not, but how I've got through there. And I have found that through the last 9 months, this is an incredibly supportive network of people. I had the pleasure of going to the event in Monterey back in March, where I was just sat scribbling and listening and just absorbing everything that I possibly could to really focus what's been the last 9 months of getting InMotion Ventures back up and running.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. Let's talk about that. I don't know how many people in the room here were in Monterey, but you may recall that was, weeks after the SVB collapse, all kinds of exciting things to talk about. But I think that has implications for the current market, right? These are unprecedented times in CVC, in some ways unprecedented in the good, but in some ways unprecedented perhaps in the bad or the caveats. So let's talk a little bit about what do you and the InMotion Ventures team see in the current market? Where are the opportunities? Where are perhaps the elevated risks or the caveats?
Mm-hmm. So we've seen a significant uptake actually in terms of our deal flow and our contacts from financial VCs mainly, as the debt markets have kind of dried up a little bit after March. Using us as the CVC for JLR as really that bit of technical due diligence. Now we've got a couple of things that we've looked at which are really interesting companies, very interesting people, but you wonder if there's is there a solution looking for a problem? Is there, and actually we've been approached by a number of people, and we've actually we're going through the investment process now and hopefully announcing it soon. And that's an investment where a year ago we would never have been approached to get involved. We're a very small fund. We typically write, very small checks, and we're kind of, 1 to 2% of companies typically. So we would normally get involved at maybe a Series A, or maybe a kind of a seed plus type stage. But we've been approached by a number of places now because our unfair advantage is that we have access to 9,000 engineers across the world, pretty much in different locations. And that allows us to really provide that credibility that some VCs are looking for, but also that startups are looking for as well. We heard it from the lady from Maersk earlier on talking about the value that, I'm going to steal the A, B, C, D, E, I think that's great. But how we look at that, about the value that we create and having that diligence, and that provides some of our co-investors with a little bit of, I suppose, credibility in what we're doing and a bit of security in that it is something that we see as a problem to be solved or an opportunity for us to exploit in the future.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, so given given that visibility into the marketplace, right? There are things happening in the here and now. How is that driving your longer term strategy?
Yeah, so the automotive industry works in 7-year cycles typically. So we know the vehicles that we're going to be launching in the next 7 years, and so therefore core for us is the next 7 years. So we have quite a broad range. We invest from right the way from seed to Series B, but that will depend on the technology that we're investing in. So we're very fluid in terms of the things that we look at. We've also got a Time Horizon 3 team who are looking at the next vehicle after the one that we're launching now. So into that 2035 and beyond space. And again, in lots of R&D centers, university spin-outs, talking to a few people today, those are the type of areas that we're looking at. And the way that we work, and a lot of CVCs shudder when I tell them that, you know, we require a business unit sponsor for an investment, and that sponsor needs to be with us in our investment committee when we go through that process, because our investment committee wants to know not necessarily that you've got a signed POC or a project in place, but that you see that there's a future working, a potential future for the company. Now, clearly, as we move further out, that level of sponsorship becomes a level of support, because clearly, if we're looking at something in 2032 or beyond, there's not many people who are willing to put their names to things like that. So we kind of have that sliding scale of looking at things that are beyond where we are today. And that's where I think the CVC can add the most value to a company like ours, where we are looking very strategically at the type of activity that we're doing. And we have a very, if they're listening, a very supportive parent in the things that we're doing to make sure that we're adding that value to them.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about, I want to come back and make sure we close out with, I think, what is a very relevant topic, and that is the relationship between, right, InMotion Ventures and the parent, because it sounds like you and JLR maybe have a different or more unique, perhaps more collaborative relationship than some of the other CVCs. So I want to put a pin in that and come back to that. But let's talk for a moment, right? Okay, so you're 9 months in. You're living through you're managing your 7 squads. You're living through probably, some of the most tumultuous time in CVC. What are the lessons learned?
I think a couple of things. I think one's resilience. You mentioned the relationship with the parent. That's a hard-fought relationship. I was talking earlier on about, I'm sure we've all had those investment committees from hell where you drive home or you take the train home and you just, why am I doing this? There's got to be easier ways of making money than this. But resilience definitely, and the belief. I think the other thing, coming from a finance background where you're just always on, you never have a chance to celebrate. And having listened to many people in this room and to listen to the amazing resources that are available, I know that we're in a real purple patch as a team. So it's important to celebrate those moments, because I know in 3, 6, 9, 12 months time it may be very different.
Yeah.
So that's been a big thing, then a big transition from being kind of a dour finance guy who always says no to stuff to being the Chinese always trying to say yes. You need to say yes to this, of course. But having a parent coming from the parents is an interesting thing for me, because I did a lot of reading before I took this role, and the common thought was you shouldn't have an insider leading. Now, it's interesting whether that's leading a CVC or being part of the investment team, but the more that I see and the more that I learn and I listen, the more that I see that there are insiders who are now leading. It's becoming more prevalent that insiders are leading CVC units. And from my perspective, I think it, obviously, as a sample of 1 and 9 months, I know no different. But for me, I couldn't imagine the way that we're structured as an operation and what we're trying to do and our mission for JLR, what we're doing, without being that insider. I think it would be very difficult to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's as a final point, and I'm not sure where we are on time. So somebody flash red or yank us off the chain. There we go. Okay, so here we go.
They'll just leave. It's okay.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah, we'll just keep
Final point. Let's talk a little bit about that collaboration with JLR. You obviously have a unique perspective as an insider. You know, maybe there are some difficulties or hurdles in that relationship, right? But let's talk about synergies. Where are they? How do they get applied in a beneficial way for you and your 7 squads?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for us is credibility. So coming from the inside and having known a lot of the senior leaders within the company, you instantly have that level of credibility that, you know, again, CVC is a real thing. It's a real job, you know, and it's a real discipline, and it can add a lot of value to the company. And I've spent the last 9 months talking as much internally as I have externally about what it is that we're doing to try and build up that level of credibility within it. Now, we invest off the balance sheet. So we have the annual fight over, you know, please, you know, can we have the same money you said no to last year? Can we have that again? To take that where, you know, where that goes, but also where we have opportunities to invest in a slightly later stage, we do that with JLR as well. So typically they're different, as you know, many of you in corporates will know, there are different pots of money kind of flying around, and we're considered non-product line capital. So if there's an opportunity for us to invest slightly later stage and we can spin it that it's going into a product, then I can start co-investing with the engineering team who own the product CapEx budget.
Sure.
And that immediately opens up much more money than they allowed me to play with. And that's where those synergies, you know, come from, working with the team, talking their language, I think, again, is another big thing for me, and making sure that you have their best interests at heart, which is the future of development, success, and evolution of the company. That's the key thing.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, I think we're gonna get pulled away here, but thank you very much, Mike, for your time. Appreciate it, and thanks for everybody for hanging with us. We know we're probably between you and cocktails, so much appreciated. But thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.